All right, welcome to Lift and Make Lighter podcast. I'm Tom Telford. I'm here with Dr. Kim Applewhite.
Hi. Hi.
We are in the offices of Utah. Let me make sure I get it all right. Okay,
All right.
You correct me. Utah Evidence. No, you say it. Describe
Utah
it.
Center for Evidence-Based Treatment. You were on the way, though.
I was on it. Evidence-based. I'm excited to be here to spend some time with you because I've been stalking you online.
Okay.
I've been learning. And some amazing people actually connected us. And so we have to thank Andreas Brown and others for saying, this is an amazing woman. You need to spend time visiting with her. So,
oh, thanks.
Yeah. So to kick this off, usually we started a little bit differently. But right now at this stage, you're arriving here this morning. Your daughter's here.
Yeah.
Are you in need of some lifting or making lighter?
Oh, what do you have in mind?
LÉVO in Latin means to lift and make lighter. And it's interesting, you've said, as we kind of sat here, casually, you said, the world is crazy right now.
It is, yeah.
What do you mean by that? What's crazy in your world? What are you seeing?
Oh, man. I just think it's interesting to look at the way that the world is evolving with technology and the way humans are evolving as well. We do a lot of talking here about how we help clients to understand what their body's trying to tell them, how we perceive threat and things like that. And the more social we get, the more likely we are to perceive social threat the same way as we would a bear in the woods or something like that. And in a digital world where the potential for threat is everywhere, it can really make it challenging for connection. And when people feel threatened, they put out threatening material. They demonize, they make sides and they then demonize that side to feel safe. And so sometimes it's hard to watch because it would be nice to get back to a world where we looked out for each other, like that we helped, lift and make lighter. Instead, there's a lot of fear around difference and what that might mean for the self. So I think about that quite a bit in this political climate, or even in the nation, in the state, in the world, how hard it seems to put yourself out there to lift someone else's burdens when it comes to systemic injustice and things like that. So, just the small things. The world is wild.
Just the little things. So much there. And I want to ask you lots of questions. I'm excited to dive into it. But before we do, you're accomplished. You've done a lot.
I do what I can.
You're a TEDx speaker.
Yes.
You're a doctor. You're a mother. You're a spouse. You're a lot of things. How would you introduce yourself? We were hopping on the elevator. I'm like, hey, I'm Tom. How would you introduce yourself to someone else?
Oh, man. Well, probably a lot of the things you said. I'm Kimberly. I live in Salt Lake City. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Right now I run the dialectical behavior therapy program. So that means most of my day is dealing with people who deal with chronic suicidality or self-harm behaviors. But really who I work with is people who deserve to trust themselves, that have gone out in the world and for whatever reason they don't know what they can get from people, and so they lose faith in people and they lose faith in themselves. And a lot of what I do, I think, in life is to help people access their inner wisdom to be able to trust themselves. So you got the stuff under my government name, but I also run a gospel choir. I do community theater. And yeah, it's all around the central theme of helping people to feel comfortable and free to understand themselves, explore themselves, and be in community with others.
Yeah, so good. And so much there. In one way, shape, or form, in 4 minutes, you've referenced the term safe and connected at least 2 to 3 times.
Yeah.
Describe that. the importance of safety and connectedness. And you mentioned, and I've been reading a lot of what you've said online. Trauma teams, seems to be a theme that exists. So can you kind of tie the two together?
For sure. Well, let's see. I mean, at first, to talk about safety, so much of that, I think we learn to put on the external environment. So, can I walk around my neighborhood without a threat of being harmed? Can I say what I need to someone to help them receive it? There's physical safety to the body, there's emotional safety, there's all kinds of safety that we can talk about that people are seeking, because ultimately we all want to be happy, we want to thrive. You can think about that as a survival instinct, but I think that we are more than just survival at this point. We want to live healthy lives, and so we put a lot of that on what is happening on the outside. But then there's so much that we also can cultivate on the inside for our internal sense of safety. And so I don't know about you, but when I go into a situation where I don't know if I can trust somebody, or like, I don't know, when I moved to Utah, even being a part of the dominant culture here in one way that people couldn't see, there is still so much internal like sweatiness and like, I can feel my heart pounding, or I'm like scanning the environment looking for that thing on the outside that's going to help me feel better. But I can search myself inside the same way, or use regulatory strategies to like tell my body that like myself is a safe place to be. And so I think what happens with trauma is that some sense of that gets disrupted, whether it is the constant impact of the outside world not bringing the safety that we seek, that causes us to like retreat from connectedness and retreat from what's going on outside because we can't trust it, or the things that we learn from the outside can sometimes affect how we feel on the inside and how safe we feel to ourselves, like internalized homonegativity that people have, or sometimes how being in a black body feels burdensome to people, whether I check that or not, whether I've experienced racism or not. And over time, that can lead to responses in the body where it's constantly prepared for something to go wrong. And that's trauma in essence.
Wow. I've never heard it actually defined and described that way. So much that I just learned from you. When you think through, I mean, you're really describing a number of things internally. There's this looking for external reinforcement. If I am a white male living in Utah, most of the time the external is reinforcing you're safe.
Got it in spades.
Right? Right? So, there's an ignorance that is not necessarily, well, it is. There is an ignorance about that. And I don't necessarily have to scaffold safety the same way that, gender, race and religion or religious affiliation may change, those things. Will you just say a little bit more about that? Because as I listen to some of the podcasts and other things that you have out there that have been awesome for me, it was interesting to hear you describe coming to Utah, being at BYU, and just, that, I don't know if it was it a culture shock? There definitely was a sense of, and you kind of describe what's your body telling you, in those moments about safety. How does this feel?
Yeah. Oh man. BYU. So I'll rewind. The first thing that came to mind is I had made a friend last summer, and they were very curious about what my experience was like as a Black woman, especially a Black woman in the religious culture here in Utah. And well, really, I grew up in North Carolina, and I feel like my religious context there was very different because, especially being Black, there are ways that I missed out on an important part of like core Black socialization because I was a member of a religion that wasn't a part of that. And so, all of the, I was going to say typical things, but maybe this is news to people. I don't know. It was really hard for me to feel totally settled anywhere, or that at any given moment that people would understand me fully. And that was hard because I could hang around other Black kids, and not only religiously, but like socioeconomically, there were things that we didn't have in common. And so sometimes it was hard to speak the same language because we didn't have the same experiences, and some of the things that we expected from each other just didn't match. And then I would go to my religious environment, and I had grown up in one church all my life, and so that felt like home to me. But every time people looked at me, they assumed that that was not my home. So I would get questions like, oh, when did you get baptized? Or like, when did I can remember my husband, who is white-ish. His grandfather is Chinese. He's decided he's multiracial now.
Is that a thing?
I suppose it is true.
White-ish?
It is true.
Okay, I like if
you're
saying it, I feel safe that you're saying it. So thank you.
He's white-ish. He looks white, and his grandfather is Chinese. Both things are true. So anyway, when I met my husband, people would, like, without asking, come up with these stories like, did you guys meet when your husband was like out proselytizing and you guys met each other that way? And so I used to have this thing like, yeah, my husband served his mission in Africa and found me under a bushel. But anyway, so I used to have this like
that's called the Flirt to Convert program.
Yes.
So we get it.
What's
his name again?
Matt.
Matt. Okay. Well done, Matt.
But anyway, he did, I guess, well, it was a flirt, but not to convert. It was already like, so anyway, so there were all these like ways that people reacted to me just from seeing me. And so when I met this friend and they were asking me like, what is it about being a Black woman in this context that is difficult? It was really hard to nail it down because it's not necessarily like blatant acts of racism, even though I've seen them, and it's not necessarily the threat of prejudice. It's just that it was really hard to be understood. It's really hard for someone to hear your story and receive it and not make any kind of interpretation on how you got there. And so I think one of the pernicious things about white culture is that like it may not be as cognizant for you how often you can like step into the air and the air holds you up. But I often feel very aware of like what ways might the wind shift today. So it's a pretty subtle thing, but it's one that keeps me on my guard quite often. Yeah. And so sometimes that is difficult. So when I worked at BYU, I think that I had a lot of hope and a lot of faith that things would go well, because the way that I was approaching it, especially as somebody who was relatively new to Utah, was like, well, these are my people, right? Yeah. Like, I heard about this place for years. Like, this is where, I went to school in New York City, but this is where, like, the cream of the crop, the faithful go, like, to school. Like, they go to be surrounded by people who, like, feel similar things as them or believe in the same things. And I'm like, so this is going to be good for me. But I think that I found that, like, on the whole, it was good. And when people wanted to assume that I came from a different place, it was very easy for them to do. Like, there was only one other Black woman working with me, and she was like from a different country and like much lighter skin. But like one time, people called us by like the opposite name, or like if people. So I worked in the counseling center. If people came to the counseling center wanting to work with somebody who wasn't of the religious culture of the school, then they were put in my schedule, even though like every counselor has to be a member of the church. It was that way even then. So it's gotten a lot of like press now, but that's how it was, you know, at least 10 years ago and before. So stuff like that is challenging, because it can really create a situation where you're constantly questioning where you belong and where you fit in and what is important to you. Because if you can go into these spaces where everybody's supposed to agree, but somehow people don't see you as a part of that, then if you, and especially if you were emotionally vulnerable or had like some mental health vulnerability, stuff like that is really challenging. And I think I often say that white people in this country are granted freedom. Like, my husband is free to be white-ish, you know, and we're not gonna question it. That's like something that he can own, he can talk about and be proud of. Like, but if I talk about my heritage, just like, no, like, we've moved past that. Like, that was painful and we don't have to talk about those things. So it's like not even the same level of reception or interest, I think.
When you describe that term freedom in this country, when you described it though, are you referencing that white people are free to feel safe? Like, is there some connection there? Just, you may be free in terms of your ability to vote. You may be free to do the things that a citizen of the U.S. can, but that doesn't necessarily mean emotional freedom or emotional confidence.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, everybody has challenges and everybody has need, and I definitely don't mean to say that, like, someone who is white cannot experience a removal of safety in the same ways that I do. It's more recognizing, well, let me rewind. The ways that we feel this lack of safety in the body is probably, because I can't observe anybody's inner state, it's probably the same. So especially when it comes to trauma, people have experienced things that make it hard to cope in similar ways that I've experienced. I think what I mean, though, is that when you are operating in a system that was designed for you, you just won't feel it in the same ways. Like, an innocuous way to say this is like, if I sit in this chair every day, eventually it's gonna like take shape of my body, whether I want it to or not. So when anybody else sits in that chair, it's not gonna necessarily feel like it was made for them, even though this chair wasn't made for anybody. But if I use it, if it whatever, it's gonna be tailored for me. Just like if I set the climate control in here to be comfortable for me, somebody else may not experience it that way. And so I think there's just a lot of ways historically that our country is set up to validate certain stories or have compassion for certain issues, that it just takes a little more work and intention to see other people's narratives in that same way.
Yeah. As an example, I'm hearing you describe that, and my mind went to, you described in a podcast that it's not uncommon or hasn't been uncommon for you to be asked, well, when did you join the church?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're a convert because of X. Whatever the lens is of that person, they're assuming that, your family has a recent conversion, at some level. I've never been asked if I'm a convert, right? I mean, it's just different. And so if you kind of fast forward that idea of if you're constantly asked certain things that reinforce gender, race, whatever that is, then I can see where there is going to be some internal insecurity because the external is constantly reinforcing those things, And so, the topic for us in coming today is mental health, but it's all of these things that are factors in scaffolding strong mental health and what it takes for my ability to be mentally strong and well is not necessarily the same that it takes others based on who they are and their experience in life and where they came from. And so there's these other factors of just there is privileges that exist along the road of mental health and what gives you safety. My safety factor in the world is different than others. So can you speak to that in terms of what you maybe are seeing here as a mental health professional and how some of those external things, around whether that's youth or adults who are coming and maybe the lack of safety factors that are impacting their ability to be mentally well?
Yeah, I'll back up and say I really appreciated what you said because it's not that I want to live in a world where people don't see difference. We have a beautiful world, like diverse plants, trees, like weather patterns. There's just so much to appreciate about difference. And contextually for me, I want you to see that I'm a Black woman and might have a different experience. I just want there to be more. Like, don't approach me with your story and your assumptions, but use what you see to be curious about my story and my assumptions. Because for sure, being Black in my religious context changes a lot of how I see things, but I think you might be surprised about what it affects and what it doesn't. I am more likely to put more emphasis on like who I trust and who I connect with in a different way. You mentioned that my daughter is here, and I'm like, when my oldest daughter was born, she's 11. I just wanted to take her everywhere. And it kind of felt like this ancestral connection with these like pictures I've seen of like women working in the fields with babies like tied on their backs. Like, I brought my child everywhere, and this one also goes everywhere. And being in Utah, I thought that would be more acceptable because I'm like, oh, everybody has babies, like, and you have a lot of them. You have to be taking them everywhere. But I think what happens most of the time is people have a bunch of kids and they like keep them they keep them at home, or they keep them in their neighborhoods, or they keep them wherever. And so then when I bring my child to work, she's not in session with me, but when I bring her to work, or when I bring her to my rehearsal spaces, or I bring her, then there's often judgment about what that means, about like my focus or my character, the ways that I like prioritize things. But I'm like, no, just get curious about what this means to me. Like I brought her today so I could be on time, because apparently this is something that people value. And so yeah, don't assume my story from looking at me. Just get curious about it. But anyway, we're supposed to be talking about mental health, like what I see now.
But you just described something beautiful about it, that if you can't take care of your child or do what you believe is the right thing for that relationship, then you are going to have stressors, right? I mean, that is the trauma, right? I mean, if I'm not taking care of my child, or if I'm not doing what I believe is right, then I'm being pulled in different directions, and our mental health is just that. Whether it's being a parent, whether it's some other stressor, it's part of it.
Yeah, I think a big part of what I see on a day-to-day basis is like people that are pulled in so many directions that it's hard to either calibrate on what your values are and what's important to you, and like by extension, what you've been giving to other people. Like sometimes we take on other people's values because we think that's what we need to do to belong or to fit in, and so like we're walking with someone else's shoes and expecting to get where we want to go. But then, yeah, the other aspect of it is like once we know what our values are, well then what, like how do I have time to do them?
Keep talking. You're onto something good there.
Yeah, so sometimes when we like find out what's important to us, then it's just hard to prioritize with everything that we have going on. And so yeah, that leads to stress over time and people feeling less of themselves. I think the other big thing that I see that people struggle with is how to be in like communion or in relationship with other people, because I think it's easy when we have our values and we know what's important to us, or we think we know what's important to us, to then say, well, everybody else that is not doing that thing just doesn't need to be in my life. So, and people will do this for all kinds of reasons. Like I see a lot on the internet about the importance of setting boundaries, or the importance of not being codependent, or the importance of like all these things that are like, be an independent being that doesn't need anybody. And something always feels off to me because I don't know that humans are built that way. It's not that we have to put ourselves in situations that hurt us, or be around people that constantly get us to shift, but like have the skills that we need to like settle a conflict, or not run away, because that reinforces avoidance in the body. The next time that you run into a problem, you just say, oh no, I'm gonna back off because that feels better. And it may not actually take people closer to the behavior that they want to be engaging in, which is like, how do I find community? How do I find safety? Just get people that are really good at blocking out what is not safe. But yeah, it's an isolating way to be, I think. And so we're constantly encouraging people to define values, identify values, see how that influences the way you feel, and like what emotions come up when you're trying to solve problems. But then, how can we set our intention to solve problems, or get what we want, or live the life that we want to live? In DBT, the work that I do most, we're constantly talking to people about building a life worth living. And we get people in really desperate states, people that don't believe in themselves, people who have just been treated terribly, people who have been suffering for a long time. And one of the things that we tell them when we like bring them in under the wing is like, you didn't create all of your problems and you have to solve them anyway. And so when you run into a problem, I mean, first of all, the problem is not just like, not every problem can be solved, and there's wisdom in that as well. But sometimes the problem is like in an internal sense, like how we have difficulty letting go of like getting over someone who has hurt us, or like getting over situations not going how you want them to. There's so much of issues like that can't be solved, but what I can do is figure out how to not let that thing block me from the life that I want to live. How do I use enough skills, develop mindfulness strategies, lean on people that I feel like I can trust, build new relationships, so that every day I'm not waking up thinking about this one thing that I can't change and that I didn't cause.
Yeah. You described something there about build a life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
What is, define that for us? What does that look like?
Oh man, a life worth living to me is like one that you can wake up every day, know who you are, know where you're going, have a purpose, and it doesn't have to be anything like super big. I often reflect on, because I think I live a much louder life than I expected, especially if you knew me growing up. But in some ways, it doesn't feel inconsistent with who I have been, because I don't know, as a kid I was like always thinking about things. Like I was a big reader and like analyzer, and anyway, I will sometimes tell people that, you know, in high school where they take those like surveys, like tell you what profession you should be. I got like artistic and social as my code, and so the social fields are all the like teacher and psychologist was in those, but like I didn't mark any of the items related to being a psychologist because they were all so boring. It was like write reports, assess data, and I'm like, where's the people in that, you know? Anyway, so I have all these creative ideas written down on that thing, like I'm gonna be a fashion journalist, or like I'm gonna be anyway, I don't even remember now, but like a year or so ago I came across this at home in my big pile of stuff I'm accumulating in my childhood home, and I was like, gosh, my life is so far from what I thought it would be at that time, and it is also exactly like it is exactly that, because I have figured out how to combine all of those things that were important to me and still do them. And I think that everybody can have that sense of knowing who they are so thoroughly that regardless of the situation they're in, they are still able to be consistent and true to who that person is.
When someone is building the life with you, you know, as a mental health professional, when they're here and you're in the therapeutic alliance and you're building that, you're working towards that with them, how often are you coaching them along letting something go versus bringing something on? You know,
man. It's like a
I'm thinking in my own journey, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I learned and brought on, but to be frank, until I let one or two childhood things go, my own therapeutic experience, you know, was tied to, you know, different modalities, but ART, just getting to the point where I was like, I needed to address something that, even though I was acquiring things that were helping me live, you know, a bigger life, you know, a louder life, so to speak, that I felt good about, it's still, I could never really live in all of it. I could never really live in the skin fully until I addressed a couple things that I needed to let go or to address. So can you just speak to that?
For sure. We do a lot of third wave approaches here. And that, I don't know how I could describe that succinctly. I've tried before, but essentially, like, you have the 4 people, like, everything's your mother, everything is stripes. You have the behaviorist, you have, like, CBT, which is what many people were doing for many years, where it's like, you know, thoughts, feelings, behaviors are linked. But you've got these, like, problem thoughts or maladaptive thinking styles or whatever. And so third wave approaches are about saying that a lot of these things that we've picked up were helpful at some point. They may not be helping now. And when you have a choice of moving toward what's important to you or moving away from what's important, there are often those things that we have, like, carried with us that make it difficult to move in the direction we want to go. And it's especially hard when that thing has served you in some way for so long. When I look at why every time I start a musical theater project, I have to, like, pump myself up and say, okay, by the time this is over, you will know everybody's name, and, like, you will be so sad because everybody will be giving hugs and you will build meaningful relationships. Like, I have to pump myself up because there's this story that I tell myself that I'm going to go in and nobody's going to like me and, like, nobody's going to have anything to say, and, like, I'm going to be the odd one out. And who knows where that came from? I don't know, probably years of being this, like, Black Mormon unicorn or whatever, but I have this, like, real thing where I, like...
You just named the title of this episode.
That's me.
It's gonna be good.
And again, there were times as a kid where I was like, I am a young Black Mormon woman in the South. Like, who has this life? And then I don't know. Anyway. But I still have this story that I tell myself, and a big part of the work we do, especially in acceptance and commitment therapy models, is to say, like, somewhere along the way, like, maybe a younger version or a different version of me was served by that caution that I have in situations. Like, maybe somebody hurt me, maybe somebody made me feel like I didn't belong, maybe I didn't feel like I could speak the language of the people around me. And I can tell myself, well, first of all, I gotta give myself grace, because, like, sometimes it is a marvel to watch the body and, like, look at all the things that our bodies remind us of to keep us safe. I'm like, man, you're going in overtime, literally. Like, you're doing a lot of work to keep me safe. I appreciate that. And I need to do different things in this moment that will help me get the meaningful relationships I want. And so a big part of that acceptance work is saying that, like, my first few days on a project, when I'm trying to get to know people, it will not feel better. It will feel like a slog. And when I introduce myself and say, hi, this is what I do, my first thought is going to be, whatever, they're not going to like you. But if I just keep going, then over time, I built up reps in my body system to know that I can be successful, whether or not these previous patterns, these previous stories I have, show up. Now, there's some times when we have experiences or, like, stories we tell ourselves or pattern situations that, like, really get in the way of healing, like you say.
Yeah.
I really think of those, like, Marie Kondo situations. Like, I don't know. I've gotten so hippie that I am like, we don't have to, like, we don't have to discredit anything that we've learned to survive in this world. It's there for a reason, and you almost invalidate yourself when you act like these things don't have place, like they shouldn't be there. But that is immaterial to whether they need to be there, or, like, whether you want to keep using that same pattern that you've been using. So yeah, like my girl Marie Kondo said, thank you. It was just like, let it go. Let it go. And sometimes, especially with interpersonal conflict, letting it go is, like, an everyday thing. Or sometimes there's a lot of grief associated with trauma too, and so the grief kind of feels like that I've heard somebody describe it as like a box that kind of will always be there, but it may grow over time, and say there's like this rolling ball in the box, and when it hits the side, it's like operation and you feel it again.
Surfaces.
Yeah. And like, again, that's like the body doing its thing. Like, thank you, my dude. And yeah, so sometimes letting it go is like a more frequent process than we would like, but I think that there is no shame in that, as long as we can be aware that that's happening, name it, and then make our intention, make our choice around that.
Yeah. Where does that term, name it, claim it, reframe it? I mean, there's all the like.
I think that's ACT. The noticing, naming, neutralizing.
Yeah.
But name it, detainment is a really popular way to say, because otherwise you would just be, I don't know, whiling out, for lack of a better term. And
well, I did. To use your concept there in my own life, that I mean, I struggled growing up. I was slow in school. I was the kid who was called out of class for tutors. For sure, going back now, I would have been diagnosed ADHD as a kid. I just really struggled in school, and so I grew up believing that I was stupid, and that's true. I did until I was 19 even. And what's interesting about that is that as hard as my learning and going through school was, it really put some chips on my shoulder about people and learning and school. And so I believed growing up that if I wasn't intellectually capable, I needed to work harder, 5 times harder, 10 times harder. Well, that served me really well, actually, into my 30s. I built a couple of companies. I sold a company. But I remember the day that I sold the company, I sat there in my home office and recognizing I don't have to work the same anymore. There was a financial finish line that occurred. And what's interesting is that day was less about the financial finish line, and it was more a realization of, I have all these chips on my shoulder of anger, of work hard, hustle, do all this extra work. If I don't now need to hustle as long and as much, who am I? You know, I mean, it's kind of this interesting thing of like, am I going to have to let that go now? It had become an identity, kind of, you know, almost a badge of courage. Like, I just work harder. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
But I was exhausted. I was destroyed with like that life of hustle. And I vowed to myself, I want to continue on, you know, in my professional life, but I want to do it more like you, an intellectual, right, bright person who learns well, like you're well educated. And at that point in my life, even though I had a bachelor's degree, I wanted to keep learning and working in a different capacity. And I knew that I was going to have to let that identity go of, well, I'm hustle guy, you know? So there was some stuff I had to do in my own journey, my own mental health, to let some things go in order to move forward and to have a different identity.
Yeah.
So there's so much wisdom in the way you kind of describe that, and what serves people and at what moments you need to let it go. I mean, it to be frank, it had become toxic.
And that is such a good example. And another thing that we see pretty often here, ADHD, especially as a kid, like the environment is just not set up for it. It wasn't even when I was a child either. I think we're getting better. Let's see what the Department of Education moves do, but it is really challenging to be a kid with executive functioning issues, show up to school on time at 8 o'clock every day, unmedicated, and just listen to people talk for hours, and then go out on the playground and try to figure other kids out that might be treating you badly because you're not like your brain. Like, it is just in DBT, we talk about invalidating environments. Like, it's the epitome of an invalidating environment for a little kid. And so I totally resonate. It's challenging. And
you build coping skills, right? I mean, people ask me, like, how did you do it? I mean, my wife will say, how did you literally get through 12 years of school and never read a book? How did anybody never catch on? And the answer is because the time you're in second or third grade, you know, regardless of where you live in the world, you're going to learn and scaffold coping strategies. And unfortunately for me, I was a master hider. I just learned to hide, disguise, you know, mesh in, don't be seen. You know,
For
I mean, I was
sure,
still
yeah.
getting yelled at every day in class because I couldn't stay in my seat, you know, but
kids are efficient problem solvers. So if you can figure out these like a few ways of escaping like short term, then yeah, you'll do it. And like over time, I think a lot of people with ADHD and other like neurospicy things just like pile on the
I love
coping
that.
strategies.
I'm gonna. Can I put that on
You're
my LinkedIn profile?
now.
I'm
Yes.
neurospicy. That's so
It's
good.
fun.
It's fun.
You know,
Because I don't know about
flavor.
the superpower thing. There's
Right.
this trend of like, oh, it's a superpower, and it's like, I assure you, as my 8, 9-year-old brain would have not said that I mean, it was a giant bag of rocks that I carried. So
for sure.
yeah.
But like, you know, it's so cool to think about like how you let yourself be free. Like, I don't have to schedule myself early mornings. I don't have to like leave myself all this time to figure stuff out or do like all the strategies or get all of the external benchmarks checked. Like, I don't have to.
Yeah.
But then it can be disoriented too. I kind of compare that to like when I lived in New York, we would often walk to the grocery store because it was close. And sometimes I was too proud for the granny cart, like the wire thing. And so I would just carry all the bags home myself. So it might be like 10, 12 bags that I had in my hand. And my husband would see me and he would reach for one and I'd be like, no, you can't grab them. Because my body had already settled to the weight of all these bags. And I was so afraid that like, if he took one that like, my body wouldn't be able to take it. And that's a lot how it's like when we develop all of these strategies for interacting in the world. And then we have a window where we can think about, like, do I really want to be carrying all of this weight? Like, of course not. But do I know what it's going to be like or what the consequences will be if I let one of these things go? No, I don't always know. I know this pain and I can, like, deal with it. And so I'm just going to keep dealing with it. And that's how people can really be in a lot of pain and suffering for years because they just don't know an alternative way to be. But that seems less risky than like taking a chance on letting something go. And there's a grace to that too. Like, I think this ADHD as a superpower thing invalidates a lot of the pain and struggle and the things that you've had to figure out, which is like a fair thing to be proud of, I think. Like the ability to, you know, make it work, to produce, I don't know, in a capitalist world, like we like these things, right? But then, being like, is it worth the pain? Am I willing to risk the temporary dishevelment of letting something go, or do I want to stick with the pain that I'm used to? It makes sense why people would go years and years doing things the same way. So
it serves you, you know, I mean, in a way it serves you. It, you know, it gave me fuel. It drove me to do certain things because, you know, I was insecure in certain ways. And so I built muscles, like you said. You just, you know, you build the strength to, you know, to carry those things. When you think about the mental health world, the climate that we're in today, freestyle for a minute. Just, if you don't mind. Just, what are you seeing locally? What are you seeing in your practice? What are the things that are blending the smoothie of the tidal wave of hard times right now?
Oh man. Well, we
I feel so safe and confident.
You know, the mental health parity is always in the back of mind, like how often people feel like they can have access to the care they want in rates they can afford, with accessibility on insurance. Now, full disclosure, we're a private pay clinic, and so I deal with a constant struggle as somebody who is responsible for administering like the financial success of a team with this like crushing access issue. If somebody needs me, they may not be able to find me. And the reason why our company went this way is because mental health work is often underpaid, undervalued for what we do. Mm-hmm. Like for a DBT client, I'm on the clock. Like, I don't think I brought my phone in here. And because my daughter's watching videos. And I'm like in a panic because I'm like, what if somebody is texting me? Like, what if I'm missing the call? Because this is just a part of my life.
Yeah.
And that isn't, so it's hard to balance like the value of what we bring with knowing that people will not reach us for those reasons. And it often feels overwhelming to go out and battle a large system that like does not see value in what therapists are doing. And some of that is shifting, which is great. But, I'm on a Utah therapist page, and all the time people are looking for someone, but like this this insurance company doesn't pay for this, and like that insurance company will only give you 10 sessions of this before or like high deductibles and whatever. So mental health parity is always in the back of my mind. Suicide rates going up in the Black community, especially for youth in particular, is also something that I'm concerned about, especially from an access issue. People you would not think that a 7-year-old would have suicide thoughts or suicide plans, but they do, and it's sad. Right now we're working to try to expand our offerings to be able to help children and families at that age. With my musical theater magic, I'm planning a little cabaret concert in the fall so that we can raise money for other BIPOC nonprofits that are helping to increase awareness and access to mental health treatment. So that's something that's really that I'm really passionate about. And then, there was like some other thing. With this world that we're living in, where you hear just all kinds of things about. I don't even know where to begin. What can I say? I hope that we as a nation can help to lift people who are going to struggle with the impact of some government action. As much as I love having more answers about autism, for example, to have somebody who is a high-ranking official speak negatively of the life outcomes that people with autism can have is challenging to me, because even if saying we don't know may be bad science, so is saying that these people can't have lives of worth or meaningful relationships. That's also bad science. We know that is not true. It is hard to see DEI programs being wiped, not because DEI programs were the best, honestly, because I don't know, especially in the pandemic, there were a lot of us who, like, maybe that wasn't our life's work, but we would jump in anyway. And so, like, that's not good science, but we know that kids of color need to know and have pride in who they are and their cultural heritage, and have the freedom to do that in the same ways that other people do. And they need to understand that not everybody is going to want them to have that freedom. And those two facts are protective for kids of color. But if we take out the programs that are providing that barrier, then we're going to see potentially even more mental health issues across the board. My first draw to therapy was actually the LGBTQ community, and like, I cannot explain why, except that it was inspiration. I was a 13-year-old kid. I read in a magazine about Harvey Milk High School in New York City, how these kids who were queer had safe places to go so that they could get their education without threats of harm from classmates. Reading that as a 13-year-old made sense to me, and it's just kind of stuck with me since then. And so things that I think could be boiled down to semantic misunderstandings, pride, like gender identity, like so many things I think could be solved if we would just like sit down, understand each other, be curious about people's stories, and instead we want to erase meaningful parts of people's history and heritage, and deny the impact that our privilege has had on them. And that stuff is painful to me.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot, but I also think about good things that are happening, like, you know, TikTok and social media, as like crazy as they can be, have also provided a window for people to get on and share information. I see people using the tip strategy, like putting their face in a bowl of ice, not for the ice bucket challenge, but to regulate their body chemistry. And I'm like, great, there's people who hopefully somebody who has ADHD won't have the same isolating experiences you did around the issue, because there's just so much better both clinical information and just like lay people information about what the experience is like. And so things like that are good and a blessing, and I feel like we're progressing in a way that we can understand things better, analyze information critically. But yeah, there's some big challenges that I often worry about. So yeah,
There's some good stuff there. One of the things that you alluded to there, and you've described it too in prior podcasts, but you talked about these socialization strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Will you talk about that a little bit more? Because that is something that I think everybody, regardless of politics, kind of has this, universal thought that your mental health is at its strongest when you know who you are, you know what your purpose is in life, you kind of know that you have some confidence and you feel safe in the world. But for those, who don't, I think strategy is interesting to kind of think through. And you alluded to that in one of your prior podcasts. Will you just describe what socialization strategies are and why that's important?
Yeah, so everybody gets socialized to be certain ways. So I guess socialization is the ways that you were taught the rules by which you live. And so it's not just the rules, but the way that you are taught them as well. What happens when you do or don't do something. So if we're talking about gender socialization, there's all kinds of ways that we are socialized to be in our sex at birth, or whatever the doctor says. So like somebody printed my birth announcement on pink paper. They put a headband in my hair. My oldest daughter, had a hat with a bow on it. So there's all of these ways that say girl, 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 girl. And over time, those things are different. Like the especially like in my religious context, being like, oh, like you, well, I was going to say it in a nice way, but I'll say it in the way that I heard it. Like, you can't wear certain things or else a boy will have this reaction. Or you can't go to a party and leave your food unattended because somebody might spike it. So this is where like rules get introduced, and how people figure out what feels safe where they can live. If we're talking about racial socialization, we all kind of have ways that we deal both with our identity as racial beings, because everybody has a like phenotype of race, but also just how we deal with that in the world. And so for race socialization strategies, there's 5 main ones that have been identified. The other 2, right, I alluded to. So if we can have pride in our identity, and we can be, especially as people of color, prepare for bias that might occur. But there's also sowing mistrust. So a lot of the concern around DEI programs is that they do too much sowing of mistrust in people who are different. And sometimes, depending on who presents the information, probably there's kernels of truth to that, but there's ways that people use mistrust as an innocent socialization strategy. Like when my mom would say to me, you don't have that kind of hair that your friends do, or like you can't go and do the same things that your white friends are doing. It's kind of mistrust based on what my mom might think the reaction or the punishment will be for doing certain things. Then there's color blindness, which also gets kind of a bad rap. But it's the idea that like, oh, we don't have to see these things. It can be whatever I want to be. But even I have used a colorblind strategy in this conversation by saying like, all humans feel things in like similar ways. Anytime you see people say like, you could be anything you want to be, and there's no hint of like the realities of systemic injustice, that's a colorblind approach. And then there's silence. So I think most of what white people will do, for example, when people will say they're being colorblind, is more on the silence. And it's kind of a combination of the two, because they're like, oh, I don't see it, like I'll just treat you as you, but then you lose like context. And so the healthiest thing for socialization strategies is to use a range and not be too dependent on one strategy. So I've had to be more thoughtful, for example, of how I socialize my kids for a lot of reasons. For one, they're mixed, with my white-ish husband. They're multiracial. I shouldn't laugh at that, because it is true. They're multiracial children, and it's important. Like, my daughter's also in the musical theater. In the first show she was in, they put her in a yellow dress, and I like could not see her, and I'm like, what is happening? And it's like that 1/8 Chinese just came out. The yellow was not working. I was like, we need a different strategy. But anyway, but I've had to be careful about like how they see themselves as women, and really work hard to be intentional about when I was in grad school when I had my first, and so I was like super sensitive about all the research that said that like girl babies tend to be held more, like parents tend to not let them wander as much as they do boys. So there's all these ways that we teach women to be kind of like dependent on external set. So I tried to be like, you guys won't have anything pink. I'm going to let you wander as much as you want. And like,
such a nonconformist.
I tried. If you fall and you hurt yourself, I'm going to wait 5 seconds, and then I'm going to go over, yeah, but like my oldest daughter, her first word was pink, so I was like, well, I failed there. But then on the whole, I just have independent, thoughtful girls who love being women, but have this openness around what they think they can do. Like, I hope that they haven't lived in a world where somebody has told them they can't do something or this outcome is unlikely or, yeah. So it's something I feel passionate about for them so that they have the freedom to be who they can be. But also as being Black girls, sometimes I forget because, I don't know, I look at them and they look different from me, and whenever I forget, they remind me. When my oldest was my youngest age, so like between 4 and 5, she asked me like if she needed to put on lotion every day, and I was like, well, mommy's brown, so I put on lotion every day, and daddy's white, he doesn't put on lotion every day, so maybe you put on lotion like every other day because you're half this I would not recommend
because you're half.
Yeah, because you're half Black, half white. And she says, no, mommy, I'm all Black, all white. And I'm like, I'm going to take credit for that one, even though I didn't say it. And so she just kind of knows. Oh, what I was going to say is she is in a production of School of Rock. And I was in a production of School of Rock last summer, so I know the show well. But my daughter went out for Summer, who was like the bossy kid role, and she said she also wanted like the backup girl, whatever. She got called back for Tamika, which like in the movie is obviously a Black girl, and like my daughter didn't even write it like on her desired. And so when we got the callback notice, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. She's a Black child. And so she kind of knows that like people perceive her a certain way, but sometimes she forgets and sometimes I forget. But certainly in the pandemic where, in the wake of the death of George Floyd and these kind of things, she wanted to be at the protest and she wanted to understand what was happening. And so I have to know that as a parent, I'm not failing her when I explain things to her, and I'm not making life worse for her by saying that we have a hard history in our country and that we, sometimes, maybe even most times, we can go out and nobody is going to hurt us, but sometimes we don't know because we don't know what people think of us. People are making assumptions about who we are all the time based on what we look like. And so trying to prepare them for the possibility of bias while also like telling them to be free, to be who they are, to like develop their talents. It's a real joy as a mother, and anybody can socialize their kids this way with the same reality as I have with mine, to know that like if you're a little white child, that it matters to like respect people's space generally, but like if you see somebody with different texture hair, to not make fun of them because everybody needs different things to take care of their bodies, but also because there's this history in our country where people made fun of things like that, but like they actually hurt people, and we don't want to be like be white and be proud to be white all you want. Like, I don't have an issue, but like name the things that you want to tame to be a better person. Don't just ignore them because they have as I'm sure you know from like your ADHD history, they just have a way of showing up if you don't recognize them. And I think that we could more effectively help each other if we just had openness around the rules that we're teaching and the ways that we're teaching them when it comes to socialization. That was a long response.
No, it's good. And I learned so much there. Can I double click on something with you?
Go ahead.
I'm curious, and we can hit pause, whenever. But I'm more curious. I'm curious to just hear from your perspective. What advice would you give to, I don't know, to families who are listening in? Because it's an interesting thing, I think, for LDS families, people who are raised in the LDS culture. How do you give the proper amount of just the importance, because it's part of identity, to race and heritage and be LDS?
Mm-hmm.
I was with some couples recently. We were traveling together, and they do a lot of work. Two of these guys started a foundation, Become More, in Cambodia, and they spend a lot of time there. These two are LDS, but they're doing an incredible humanitarian lift in Cambodia. And I was just curious to hear, their work that's there. And, they work with a lot of LDS people and non-LDS, but all sorts of different faith backgrounds there. But I was just curious, for LDS people or Christians, how do they become Christian, or how are they LDS and still navigate the cultural norms, which is very much reincarnation, karma is the culture. And so it just was a fascinating thing to think through. I've not had to do that. I don't have to navigate that certain thing, but I'm compassionate for, if I had joined a church or religious affiliation and it was assumed that I would basically give up or forego heritage or race or very deeply seated, like for generations, culture of karma. And how do you even navigate that, So can you speak to that a little bit, of just what it's like to be LDS and to still have the importance of maintaining just race and heritage and all the stuff?
Yeah, I think as weird as it is, I think people don't often think of being a member of the LDS Church as like a way of life, even though literally everybody has said that. Like, we're a peculiar people, and like there's this whole group mentality that like you left one country to go to another country, but yet like we're just like everybody else. It's strange to me sometimes. But anyway, it's funny. I don't remember who was saying it the other day, but they like had this Mormon trope of like, they were trying to connect it to how bad Utah drivers are. And I was like, well, there's truth connect that to the Mormon thing again. And they were like, I feel like they just drive in a way like they own things and everybody has to kind of fall in line. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my people. I recognize that now. Yeah. And it's so interesting because especially in the LDS Church, there's also this persecution narrative and a lot of stuff that is safety driven, and like this need to know who's in and who's out as a means of safety. And a lot of that historically makes a lot of sense. Like if you move from state to state to state to country, and like you felt like you were being pursued and followed, and like there were laws on the books that said like exterminate. Like this is the Mormon heritage that I grew up with, or that I learned, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that we would be jerks to anyone who was different. Like the persecuted people who crossed the plains are the same people that came out here and wiped out Native American populations, and it's driven by the same kinds of stuff. And so I often wonder how people can hold up one side and have so much hesitancy to hold up this other thing, like it's all kind of consistent. But like in the modern day like practice of things, I think sometimes it's challenging because I truly believe that being like a child of God is my most important identity. And because I believe that there's probably something that I'm supposed to learn from being in this body and interacting every day with people that do not share this history and like the things that like inhabiting my body means. And that is what I have faith in. It's not, sometimes with the history of the church, so some Black people think, harmful things happen because we were stronger in a previous life, or because this, and I do not ascribe to those things. I understand that people hold on to what they hold on to, but I do believe that we're meant to have the experiences that we have, and if other people also believe that they're meant to have the experiences they have, how does that lead us to treat our family fairly? Like, how does it bring us closer together in the Zion that our Father wants to see? Like, we birth out these big families, and we know what it feels like when like siblings fight with each other. We hate that. We know what it feels like when one kid struggles and we have to focus on them, and we hope that the other kids are taken care of. We know what it feels like to count on everyone in the family to treat each other well, but somehow we cannot do that when we're thinking about other people's families, even though we believe that we're all one family. And so understanding that we come from different racial backgrounds and we are all still one family because we're all children of God is why I do what I do. And it is why I want you to understand my experiences, because if we're in the same family, you need to understand them to take care of me. And somehow I think that we have, or I don't know, because I have fears about different things, and so I imagine that others of my melanin challenged family members also have fears about things. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to cop to something bad that they themselves did not do. And it just leads to a lot of awkwardness where there need not be. It all comes back to curiosity for me. 2018 was kind of like, I feel like it was that time to be Black in LDS. Like, everything, especially out here, it just felt like everything was happening. They have this like worldwide church event, the B1 celebration. That year, the gospel choir that I was in went to the NAACP convention because the church had just made this partnership with the NAACP. I was like, this is everything. And what was interesting was like, I don't know, I felt like I have not had another religious experience personally except for being in this church. Like, it's the only denomination that I have known. And so like I feel like I love the church just as much as anybody does, if not more. But there were some experiences I had. This is not what I wanted to share, but I'll just share it. There were some experiences that I had, like, after that time, I could hear hymns and be like, this is a story for me. It's not just for the pioneers. Like, how long we have wandered as strangers in sin and cried in the desert for thee. That's being Black in Utah, frankly. Like, our foes have rejoiced with our sorrows they've seen, but we'll be free. I'm like, that's for me. It's not just for them, it's for me. And so, anyway, around that time, there was, like, when the church made this partnership with the NAACP, there was a letter that went out, and it said it was from the president of the church, President Nelson. Man, he's been in there a long time. Anyway, it was from President Nelson, and it was apologizing for racism in the church. And I was like, well, the President Nelson said you should write him in, so like maybe this is what he was talking about. And I could just remember feeling like, I didn't even know that I needed that from anyone, but I was like, oh man, this is great. And
so
then,
you
like,
had been raised in it, but to you, that wasn't even a recognition at that time. That was kind of, was it telling you something that had gone on that you didn't even or were aware of at that point?
No. So like if you stalk me by my my married name, you'll see an article that I did that it talks about, oh no, maybe it's in a book. I don't remember where it is. Anyway, I tell a story somewhere where the way that I found out about the church's racial history is when my grandma was investigating the church, and my dad told her that blacks could not have the priesthood at one point, and she was like, I'm not, like, I don't want to be a part of this. And so the main pain at the time that I learned about it, maybe like 15, was that now my grandma wasn't going to be a part of the church or in like the eternal family thing of it. Like, I don't freak out about that. I'm like, there's enough ways that gets worked out, but like having her there with us then meant something to me. And so it was like the pain of losing her, but also like trying to understand, like, why would I be a part of something that my grandma thought was disrespectful because I respected her and she did not like this thing. And I knew enough about race and racism to understand the implications of it, but like seeing her react the way she did really had an impact on me. So I wouldn't say it isn't something that bothered me over the years, but probably shelved it. Yeah, so it kind of was like a part of my reality, but like I tried to focus on what my current experience being in the church is, which is like sometimes good, sometimes not so good, but like overall good. So that's what I mean when I say I didn't know that I needed an apology, because kind of like how you were talking about with ADHD, like I had just developed all these coping strategies for being okay with it, or like trying to make the best of it, knowing that it didn't feel like something that was right to me, explaining it in the context of what was going on in the country and at that time of the priesthood ban. Anyway, so that's how I took it. When this apology letter came out, I was like, wow. And then I went online to see what people were saying about it, and another well, I would say a prominent, I don't know if I'm prominent, a prominent black LDS figure was like, it's fake. And I was like, what? And so that was like the weirdest roller coaster I had been on, because like here I had this like ease of mind that I did not know was possible, all to just feel like totally crushed. And then I could hear my mind going, well, like, you shouldn't have thought that it was real anyway. And then I'm like, where did that thought come from? Like, because so then it made apparent like all the ways that I had been coping, and one of those involves like not expecting much from people, or not expecting people to understand. And that's like a heavy burden sometimes. There's a woman in the Utah County area who she's like a saint on this earth. Whenever something happens that she feels might be challenging for people in the queer LDS intersection to face, so like any policy changes, or like when somebody says something, she will solicit donations for people to purchase Domino's pizzas. I don't know where she landed on Domino's, but I'm glad, because Papa John's is racist, but that's fine. So she had people would donate to give Domino's, and then she would send Domino's to whoever said that they wanted one. And so this same woman did a pizza call for us. Like, she did it for Black people who were affected by the apology. And I had given money to her before, and so she's like, do you want a pizza? And I'm like, oh no, man, I am good. But she's like, whatever, take it. And I was like, okay, fine. So I thought I was gonna get one pizza. She sent like 2 or 3, and then she sent like desserts, and I was like, wow. But one thing I realized is that I had not eaten from the time that I read that until the time I got the pizza, which was like 6 hours. And sometimes I do not realize how much mental energy I'm spending on things. And I was working at the inpatient hospital at the time. And so I was like, I must have been running on fumes. Like, that's what it means to be in the family of God to me, to be so in tune with what other people might be experiencing, that you show up for them, that you minister to them, that you act as Jesus would. And you can't not see people the way that Jesus did and expect to do what Jesus did. You just can't. So that's my long answer to race in the church.
It's awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
So good. Anything else that's just in your heart and mind regarding mental health, church, anything that's just near and dear to you?
I mean, I could run my mouth about anything, or you see it at least. But
Yeah.
no, I just have a lot of gratitude for what you all are trying to do, and to view mental health stuff from the lens of lifting burdens is really meaningful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. And tell Whitish.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed.
No. I'd love to meet him sometime. But thank you for all that you do, who you are, and what you're doing here to lift others.
Thanks.
It's appreciated. Thanks again.